Team 7. A very wacky team comprised of a knucklehead, a prodigy, and a deadweight. Well, at least until Shippuden anyway. But what would happen if we were to remove this burden from the team? Well, it's time to find out in episode 3 of Character Delete. Now, the big question is, who would be the third member of the team? This is tough, though it is confirmed by the show that who gets chosen is actually thought over heavily by the teachers. So they actually put a lot of thought into who goes into what team. Now, we could speculate all day on who the person could be, but judging by the fact that there were no leftover students after the choosing was done, it's assumed that it not having one student means that one team would have to have two members. Yep, you heard me right. In this hypothesis, Naruto and Sasuke will not have a third team member. It would only be them and Kakashi. And this creates problems immediately. You see, there's one big difference between Naruto and Dragon Ball, and that's the fact that this show doesn't really like to have Yamchas in it. And what do I mean by that? Basically, I mean characters who are only relevant for a short period of time and then spend the rest of the show essentially being on the sidelines and not contributing to anything major to the plot. Naruto, on the other hand, loves to always utilize all the characters that are a part of the Leaf Village. Even in later seasons, characters that appeared early on will always contribute to something important every time. So, because of this, removing any of the characters in the show will always have big repercussions somewhere. Now it's time to talk about Zabuza. Naruto and Sasuke should still be able to rescue Kakashi from the water prison and still defeat Zabuza the first time around. The problem arises in Zabuza's rematch with them. Originally, Sakura's job was to guard the bridge builder, but since she isn't there, well, Kakashi's going to have to protect him himself, which also means that he'll be at a disadvantage when fighting against Zabuza's silent kill technique. The fight with Haku, Naruto, and Sasuke should still be identical. The fight with Kakashi and Zabuza, on the other hand, will be more in Zabuza's favor as he can target the bridge builder, which makes it harder for Kakashi to fight him. But I still think it's possible for Zabuza to still be defeated and still have everything with Mr. Gato play out the same way it normally does. It's time for the tune-in exams. In this arc, luckily, having two members on the team and not three isn't an issue, due to the fact that each individual student gets a form that they fill out, basically giving the teachers consent that they want to take part in said exams. So Sasuke and Naruto would naturally say yes to the proposal. The only things to note here is the fact that Sakura won't complain to Sasuke about getting bitten by Orochimaru, which means that Naruto likely won't catch on to this until much later. Not only that, but Ino will have a different opponent, but things should still pretty much play out the same way regardless of that. Things start to get more interesting in the Tsunade retrieval arc. Jiraiya and Naruto still train and they still get her to go to the village, but after she becomes Hokage, things start to change. Since Sakura doesn't exist, that means Tsunade will not have a student to learn how to become a medic, though the part that makes this whole thing interesting is, what would Ino do at this point in the story? Ino Yamanaka. This character is going to be a focus for a while in the story, as she changes dramatically. Not having Sakura as a rival means that she has a better chance at Sasuke. Though, knowing him, he would reject her anyway. Also, since she lacks that rival for Sasuke, she won't have the same drive as she would before, and would probably end up being weaker than she is in the main story, due to her not feeling like she needs to surpass Sakura. There is a point in the plot where her father tries to give her training. She tries to slack off on the training and make excuses because she doesn't want to work so hard. Then she realizes that Choji and even Shikamaru is trying really hard to learn their lessons for their family's techniques. This makes her feel like she isn't trying hard enough and is holding them back, and this is part of her drive to become one of Tsunade's apprentices. Though with Sakura not being there, she might not have as much of a reason to see Tsunade for the training, but we're going to assume that she will still try to become a medic like Sakura was originally going to. Now we've reached Shippuden, and the first arc of saving Gaara already creates a lot of issues, because in the normal story, this is the first time that Sakura really gets to do something major and that really impacts the story. In this arc, Sakura fights Sasori. Sasori loves to use poison for his attacks, and because Sakura was such a prodigy when Tsunade trained her, she was able to find an antidote that no one else could figure out. Granny Chiho was also well known for her medical prowess in the Sand Village, and not even she knew of an antidote for his attacks. And because Sakura knew the antidote, she was able to defeat Sasori by using said antidote. So the question is, how well would Ino fare in this fight if she were to take Sakura's original place? Chances are, she wouldn't even be allowed to have that position. Tsunade would not let her go because she wasn't as big a deal to her as Sakura was. So no one really knows who would have been sent there at the time with Naruto in order to do this mission. Let's assume that due to circumstances, Ino would go with Naruto on the mission. One problem would arise immediately. Ino's abilities at medical prowess may not be enough to save Kankuro's life after he got poisoned by Sasori when trying to trail him. As for what happens when they find the location and try to track them down with Might Guy's team, one big thing that I think will be different is that Ino would not be the one to go into the cave, since she wouldn't have the super strength required to break the rock that blocks the path. So she would be one of the ones to get one of the tags. She'd probably take Might Guy's place in that respect, and Guy would probably be the one to go in instead. So Guy and Chiho versus Sasori. That's an interesting matchup. But since Might Guy prefers close-range combat and Sasori loves to use ranged combat, he would be at a disadvantage, not to mention the aforementioned poison, which does not have an antidote in this scenario. Might Guy could use the gates, and if he uses the gates, he could increase his speed to a point where he wouldn't be caught by any of Sasori's moves, and using his extreme speed and power, he could blitz him and destroy him before he gets a chance to pull off a lot of his moves. He might even be able to take him out before he sends out his army of puppets. So this is one instance where a potential problem of Sakura not being there can be fixed with Might Guy. However, a few arcs later, we get to the war arc, and this is where things get hairy. Oh, the war arc. I could do a whole video about why I hate the war arc, but that's for another day. The big problem with Sakura not being here during this arc is the fact that during the earlier stages of the arc, when they're fighting all of the white Zetsus, lots of ninjas get injured, and she is one of the core members of the healing team that heals many people. But the fact that she isn't there, and the fact that Ino isn't really a medic, means that a lot more lives will be lost in the war. During the later stages, when they're fighting Madara, this is where bad news comes out. Because, well, Naruto gets his Nine Tails extracted, and the rule is that a Jinchuriki will die without their beast. So he is dying, and Sakura is able to sustain his life just long enough for Minato to give him his part of the Nine Tails to revive him. But without Sakura and no one else who's around to help heal Naruto, it is very likely that Naruto will die And at that point, the war would have been lost, and Madara's plan would have succeeded, which would be the end of the world, and the end of the story. Well, this story didn't turn out too good. The infinite Tsukuyomi gets launched, and everyone's life energy gets sucked away by the divine tree. Kaguya comes back, and no one will be around to stop her except Sasuke, who will not be enough to stop her alone, since there needs to be two counterparts in order to seal her. So that's out of the question. This story has a negative outcome. And that was Character Delete Episode 3, folks. Now, it's very likely I missed details on certain filler episodes or other episodes that could have also been problems that Sakura needed to be there for, but I don't really remember the show as well as Dragon Ball, where in Dragon Ball I can pretty much name any scene, but in this show, it's long, I don't always want to watch through the whole thing, and I tend to forget certain details. So some of you guys in the comments can tell me all the foolish things I missed. It will be fun. Anyways, I'll see you guys later.